Welcome to Void Case Files. Before we dive into tonight's disturbing account, I need you to do something for me. If you're enjoying these deep dives into the unknown, hit that subscribe button right now. We're on a mission to reach 10,000 subscribers by the end of 2026, and with daily videos exploring the darkest corners of reality, you won't want to miss a single case. Now, let's begin. Imagine your world shattering in an instant. Now imagine the people who raised you being the key to a cosmic horror beyond comprehension. The police who took them aren't from Earth, and what they revealed about the Void's so-called guardians will make you question everything you thought you knew about the Abyss. Tonight, we're going to uncover the truth behind their transformation. This is Case File 447, The Night They Took My Parents. My name is Ethan Whitmore, and I need to tell you what happened to my family before I forget how to use words altogether. I'm 23 years old, and 6 months ago I moved back into my childhood home in Oregon City to help my parents run their antique bookshop. The house sits on a bluff in the old Klamath neighborhood, with windows that overlook the Willamette River and the falls beyond. On quiet nights, you can hear the water rushing over the rocks, a sound that's been constant here for thousands of years. My parents, Thomas and Eleanor, loved that sound. They'd stand at the living room window on summer evenings, watching the sunset paint the mist rising from the falls in shades of amber and gold. The bookshop was their life's work, crammed floor to ceiling with rare manuscripts, first editions, and historical documents about the Pacific Northwest. They specialized in Oregon Trail history, the kind of obscure settler diaries and expedition journals that collectors would drive hours to see. Business wasn't spectacular, but it was steady, honest work. The shop smelled like old paper and furniture polish, and there was something comforting about being surrounded by all that preserved history. I thought I'd learn the trade, eventually take over when they retired, maybe add my own touch to the collection. It seemed like a good life. A simple life. Then 3 weeks ago, I woke up at 6 in the morning and found my mother standing at the living room window in her nightgown, barefoot on the hardwood floor, staring out at the falls. The way she stood there, completely motionless. Something about it made the hair on my arms stand up. "Mom, you okay?" She didn't turn around, didn't even acknowledge I'd spoken, just kept staring at that rushing water like it was whispering secrets only she could hear. After a full minute of silence, she finally turned her head, and her eyes had this distant quality I'd never seen before. The water remembers everything, Ethan. Every person who's ever stood beside it. Every drop of blood that's fallen into it. It never forgets. I laughed nervously. "You feeling all right? Maybe you need more sleep." "I don't need sleep anymore. Sleep is for people who live in only one moment at a time." That should have been my first real warning, but I told myself she was overworked, stressed, maybe coming down with something. The next morning she was back at the window, and the morning after that, always in the same spot, always with that same 1,000-yard stare, like she was watching something happen in the water that I couldn't see. My father changed differently. He started spending entire afternoons in the basement with the door locked, and when I'd press my ear against it, I could hear him having full conversations with someone. Except there was only one voice, his, responding to questions that were never asked aloud, agreeing with arguments I couldn't hear. "Dad, who's down there with you?" He emerged after 4 hours, his clothes rumpled, his eyes bloodshot. "The voices from below. They've been trying to reach us for 15 years, son. We thought we were strong enough to resist, but we were fooling ourselves. You can't resist something that's already inside you." Their eating stopped entirely. I'd make dinner and they'd sit at the table, moving food around their plates, but never taking a bite. When I confronted my mother about it, she said everything tasted like ashes, like the food was already dead and rotting before it reached her mouth. My father claimed his body had found other ways to sustain itself, though he wouldn't explain what he meant. Scout, our golden retriever who'd never met a person he didn't love, started cowering whenever my parents entered a room. He'd whine and press himself against the wall, ears flat, tail tucked between his legs. I'd never seen him scared of anything before, let alone his own family. The moment that truly terrified me happened on a Thursday night. I got up around 3 in the morning to get water, and as I passed the back door I glanced outside. Both of my parents were standing in the backyard in their pajamas soaked with dew, staring straight up at the sky. Their heads were tilted back at exactly the same angle, their arms hanging loose at their sides. I watched them for 10 minutes. They didn't move, didn't blink, just stood there like statues, like they were waiting for something to descend from the stars and claim them. The next day, desperate for answers, I went to the bookshop alone. They'd left early for some appointment they wouldn't explain, which gave me time to search. I was reorganizing the back room when I knocked over a box and a book fell out from behind the shelf. Accounts of the Oregon Trail Expedition 1853 read the spine, bound in leather that felt wrong under my fingers. Too smooth. Too cold, like touching skin that had been dead for hours. I opened it and realized it had been hollowed out. Inside was a journal filled with my parents' handwriting, pages and pages of notes and drawings that made my stomach turn. The symbols looked like they were moving when I wasn't looking directly at them, sliding across the page like living things. There were references to the Watchers beyond the falls, and sketches of figures standing in deep water, their bodies elongated and wrong. The first entry was dated 15 years ago. We found it today at an estate sale in Klamath Falls. The seller said it came from an old collection, a man who'd spent his life studying Crater Lake. When we opened the book, we both felt it. A pull, like standing at the edge of a cliff and feeling the urge to jump. We took it home. We shouldn't have. We know we shouldn't have. But we can't stop reading it. I sat on the floor of that dusty back room and read through 15 years of my parents' secret descent into something I didn't have words for. They described voices that came from beneath the world, from spaces between the cracks in reality. They called the sources the Watchers, or the Architects of the Deep. They knew they were being changed, reshaped into something that could serve as a bridge between our world and somewhere else, somewhere vast and hungry and patient. The recent entries were desperate. We tried to burn it. The book won't burn. We threw it in the Willamette and it appeared back on our doorstep the next morning, completely dry. It's inside us now. We can't cut it out. We can't run from it. The transformation is accelerating and we're terrified of what we're becoming, but we're also eager for it. And that eagerness is the worst part because it's not ours, it's theirs, and we can't tell the difference anymore between what we want and what they want us to want. I was so absorbed in reading that I didn't hear the bell above the shop door. Mrs. Chen, one of our regulars, found me sitting on the floor surrounded by journals, and when I looked up at her, I must have looked half mad. "I was hoping to find your parents," she said carefully. "They're out. Can I help you with something?" She frowned. "Your parents? Thomas and Eleanor Whitmore?" "Yes, of course." "Honey, I don't know who you're talking about. This shop has been run by Harold and Margaret Brennan for as long as I've been coming here. Are you feeling okay?" The room tilted. "No, that's wrong. My parents have owned this shop for 20 years. She backed toward the door. "I think you need to go home and rest. Maybe see a doctor." After she left, I looked up the shop's business registration online. Harold and Margaret Brennan, owners since 2004. There were photos of them on the website, two smiling strangers I'd never seen in my life. I called my aunt in Salem and described my mother to her. She said my mother had blonde hair, not brown. She said my mother was shorter than she actually was. She remembered details that were completely wrong, like her memory was being rewritten in real time. Something was erasing my parents from the world, and I was the only one who still remembered them as they really were. That night, November 8th at exactly 9:23 p.m, 3 black SUVs pulled up in front of our house. No license plates, no markings, just smooth black paint that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. 6 figures stepped out, all wearing identical dark suits, and the way they moved made my skin crawl. Their steps hit the ground at exactly the same moment, perfectly synchronized, like watching one person reflected in 6 mirrors. I stood at the window watching them approach, and under the streetlight I could see their shadows stretching across the pavement. The shadows were wrong. Too long, with too many angles, bending in ways that didn't match the bodies casting them. One of the figures had a shadow that seemed to have extra limbs. I felt a compulsion to open the door, a need so overwhelming that my hand was on the knob before I'd consciously decided to move. I opened it. The lead figure stood at the front, a man with sharp features and eyes that didn't blink often enough. When he spoke, his voice had a layered quality, like multiple recordings of the same person played slightly out of sync. "We're here for Thomas and Eleanor Whitmore." "Who are you? Show me your identification." All 6 reached into their jackets in perfect unison. They produced federal badges that gleamed in the porch light. I took the lead agent's badge and looked at it. The agency name read Department of Dimensional Security. I blinked, looked again. Now it said Office of Reality Preservation. Another blink. Federal Bureau of Existential Threats. The text was changing every time my eyes left it and returned. "These aren't real," I said. "Reality is a matter of perspective, Mr. Whitmore." Footsteps behind me. My parents were coming up from the basement, moving like sleepwalkers, their clothes disheveled, their faces slack. But their eyes. In the porch light, their eyes were reflecting light like an animal's eyes, an amber glow that made them look like strangers wearing my parents' faces. "Mom, Dad, don't go with them. Something's wrong." They walked past me without speaking. My mother's hand brushed mine, and her skin was ice cold. I grabbed her arm. "Please, talk to me." She stopped, turned. Her pupils were so dilated that her eyes looked black with just a thin ring of amber around the edge. "Don't look for us, Ethan. It's already inside you, living with us these past months, breathing the same air, existing in our proximity. You're infected now too. I'm so sorry. We tried to keep you safe, but proximity is all it needs." My father squeezed her shoulder gently. "We fought it for 15 years, son. We thought love for you would be strong enough to let us resist, but it's too vast, too patient. And now it's too late for all of us." The agents led them to separate vehicles. My parents held hands until the last possible second, their fingers interlacing in a gesture of such human tenderness that it broke something in me to watch. Then they were separated, placed in different SUVs, and I knew somehow that this was the last time I'd see them as the people they'd been. Before the vehicles pulled away, the lead agent handed me a small white card. 3 days. The address is on the card. Come alone. The card read, "Former Crater Lake Observatory, November 11th, 7 p.m. I called the police, the FBI, the US Marshals. No one had any record of federal agents operating in Oregon City that night. I called family members, and each conversation was worse than the last. My uncle couldn't remember what my father did for a living. My aunt described my mother with completely wrong physical features. My father's brother wasn't sure who I meant when I said the name Thomas. Their existence was being erased from memory, from records, from the world itself, and only I still held on to who they'd really been. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard whispers in languages that shouldn't exist, but somehow I understood them anyway. They were calling me home to a place I'd never been, promising me understanding that would shatter everything I thought I knew about reality. The next morning, I forced myself to go down to the basement, and what I found there is burned into my mind forever. Every surface was covered in writing and symbols and drawings, the walls from floor to ceiling, the support beams, even parts of the ceiling, spirals within spirals, alphabets that hurt to look at, sketches of figures standing in deep water with their arms raised towards something above, and in the center of the floor, painted directly on the concrete, was a massive circular diagram maybe 8 feet across. At its center was a detailed drawing of Crater Lake, annotated with phrases like Lau's Gate and the Deep Watcher, and Giiwas, threshold between what is and what should not be. Dozens of journals were scattered around the room. I sat on that cold concrete and read through 15 years of documentation as my parents slowly lost their humanity. They'd purchased the book at an estate sale, a collection from someone who'd spent their life researching Crater Lake. The book claimed to be expedition notes from 1853, written by John Hillman, the first white man to see the lake, but the contents were nothing like normal historical documents. June 12, 1853. We reached the crater today despite the Indians' warnings. They called it Giiwas and said it was forbidden, that to look upon it was to invite death and madness. We ignored them. God forgive us, we ignored them. The lake is impossible. Water that blue shouldn't exist in nature, and when you stare into it long enough, You see depths that extend far beyond any normal body of water. You see forever, and forever stares back. June 13th, 1853. Collins is gone. We heard him screaming at midnight, ran to the rim, and saw him in the water, swimming down, diving deeper, and he was laughing as he descended into that impossible blue, deeper and deeper until we couldn't see him anymore. The Indians say the lake took him. I believe them now. June 15th, 1853. I can hear it even here, miles from the crater. A voice from the depths speaking directly into my mind. It knows my name. It knows every secret I've ever kept, every sin I've ever committed, every fear that wakes me in the night. It's been waiting for us, waiting for someone to finally come and look upon it, without the protection of reverence and tradition. We broke the sacred boundary. Now it's breaking us. The historical section ended there, but the book continued in my parents' handwriting. They'd spent 15 years documenting their transformation, the voices that grew louder each day, the way their perception began to shift and expand. They started seeing the history of objects when they touched them, witnessing the entire life cycle from raw materials to finished product. They experienced moments when time seemed to branch, when they could perceive multiple versions of the same instant existing simultaneously. They made their first pilgrimage to Crater Lake 6 months after finding the book. Standing at the rim, we finally understood. The lake isn't just water, it's a threshold, a weak point in reality, where something vast can reach through from the other side. Below the surface, in depths that extend beyond physical measurement, something ancient dwells. Something that existed before stars, before galaxies, before time itself had meaning. It's not alive in any way we understand life, but it's aware, and it's been waiting for someone sensitive enough to hear its call. We've answered. There's no going back now. They tried to resist. They documented every attempt to destroy the book, to distance themselves from each other, to break free from whatever was reshaping them. Nothing worked. The book was indestructible. Separation only made the voices louder, and with each passing year they felt themselves becoming less human, and more like conduits for something that existed in spaces between spaces. The recent entries showed them making monthly trips to Crater Lake, meeting with others who'd been called. 12 families total, scattered across Oregon, all experiencing the same transformation. The journals included photographs from these trips. My parents standing at various viewpoints around the crater, the vivid blue water stretching behind them. But in every photo, if you looked carefully, there were additional figures in the background, blurry shapes standing at a distance, watching. I counted them, 7 in one photo, 9 in another. The same figures appearing in different photos from different dates, as if they were waiting at the lake permanently, watching each new person who came to the rim. The most recent entry was from 3 days before they were taken. The final stage is beginning. Our bodies barely need food or sleep anymore. We exist in multiple temporal states simultaneously. Yesterday, Eleanor was 5 seconds ahead of me in time for over an hour. We could see each other but couldn't quite touch, like we were separated by a thin membrane of chronology. Ethan will notice soon. We've tried so hard to hide this from him, but he lives with us, breathes the same air, exists in our space. The infection spreads through proximity. God forgive us. We may have already given this to our son. I sat in that basement surrounded by evidence of my parents' slow dissolution until darkness fell and I couldn't see the pages anymore. Then I found the book itself, hidden in a false-bottom drawer in an old filing cabinet. The moment my fingers touched it, electricity shot up my arm, and I felt like I was falling even though I remained perfectly still. The cover looked like leather but felt like something alive, warm and slightly pulsing under my touch. I opened it to the title page, Accounts of the Expedition to Giiwas, 1853. But underneath, in ink that seemed to glow faintly in the darkness, were symbols that made my eyes water and my head ache. I read John Hillman's accounts, and they were worse than the journal excerpts suggested. His grip on language itself seemed to deteriorate as the entries progressed, as if the act of witnessing what dwelled in the lake had damaged his ability to communicate in human terms. The final pages were almost incomprehensible, strings of words that didn't quite connect into sentences, descriptions of colours that didn't exist and sounds that couldn't be heard, and a presence so vast that the human mind simply couldn't process it without breaking. The thing spoke meaning directly into my consciousness last night. It showed me that our reality is just one layer among infinite layers, all existing simultaneously, all interpenetrating each other. The thing exists across all of them at once. It's trying to help us evolve, to expand our perception beyond the prison of three-dimensional space and linear time. But human minds weren't built to process that much reality. Most people who hear its call go mad. Some throw themselves into the water. Others walk into the forest and vanish. I'm writing this as a warning to whoever finds this book next. If you're reading these words, you're already hearing its call. The architects have chosen you. You can try to resist, but time is just another dimension to them. They've already seen your decision. They've already seen you standing at the rim of the lake. They're just waiting for you to catch up to that moment. The final page, written in letters so large they filled the entire sheet. Close this book. Never open it again. Go somewhere far from water and forget you ever saw this. Below that, in my parents' handwriting, too late for us. Please, God, let it not be too late for Ethan. I closed the book and felt the loss of it immediately, an aching emptiness like a piece of myself had been cut away. I wanted desperately to open it again, to keep reading, to understand more. Instead, I forced myself upstairs and locked it in a drawer in my bedroom, but I could still hear it. The whisper of pages wanting to be turned, knowledge wanting to be absorbed, calling to me through wood and metal and space. I didn't sleep for the next 2 days. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw depths of impossible blue stretching down forever, and something vast moving in those depths, aware of me, waiting for me, patient as stone. November 11th arrived. I got in my car at noon and drove south toward Crater Lake, giving myself plenty of time for the 4-hour drive. As I climbed into the Cascade Range, reality began to feel thin around me, like a sheet worn translucent by too much use. My radio started picking up static, but within that static I could hear voices, multiple people speaking in perfect unison, whispering in that same layered tone the agents had used. The words weren't clear, but the meaning came through. Come home, come down to the depths, come and see what we've been trying to show you. My phone lost signal. The GPS stopped working. I navigated by road signs and something deeper than conscious thought, drawn forward by a pull I couldn't resist even if I'd wanted to. The landscape changed as I drove higher. Dense forests gave way to volcanic rock, black and sharp, the bones of the earth exposed and unhealed. The mountains here were young, violent, born from catastrophe. This was a place where the planet had torn itself open, and perhaps, in that tearing, other things had gotten through. A sign, Crater Lake National Park, ahead 15 miles. The light changed. Everything took on a blue tinge, subtle but undeniable, as if I were seeing the world through water. Shadows deepened and seemed to move independently of the objects casting them. I turned off the main highway onto a barely maintained side road, following the directions from the card. 3 miles through thick forest, branches scraping against my car, and then I saw it. The observatory. The structure looked abandoned, concrete and steel from the 1950s or 60s, the dome tarnished and incomplete. Moss covered the walls, trees pressed close. The whole building tilted slightly, as if the ground had shifted beneath it over the decades. But there were fresh tire tracks in the gravel. Multiple vehicles had been here recently. I parked and approached on foot. As I got closer, I realized the building was far larger than it appeared, extending back into the hillside, burrowing into the volcanic rock like it was trying to hide from the sky. The front door stood wide open. I stepped inside and found myself in a pristine white corridor with fluorescent lighting and clean floors. The contrast with the ruined exterior was impossible. Wrong. The corridor extended deeper than it should have, past where the building's back wall ought to be, reaching into the mountain itself. Mr. Whitmore. A voice behind me made me jump. A man in a white lab coat stood there, appearing as if from nowhere. He was in his 50s, Grey hair, wire-rimmed glasses, eyes that look tired and kind and sad all at once. "I'm Dr. Harrison Kane. We've been expecting you. Thank you for coming." "Where are my parents?" "They're here. Safe in a sense, though that word has limited meaning in their current state. Come with me. I'll show you everything. But I need to warn you first. Once you understand the truth, you can't unknow it. The knowledge itself changes you. Are you absolutely certain you want to proceed?" "I need to see them." He nodded slowly. "Yes, I suppose you do. This way." Dr. Kane led me deeper into the facility through corridors that curved and branched in ways that made no architectural sense. We passed rooms with windows, and through them I glimpsed things that made my rational mind stutter. A woman floating in a tank of water, eyes open, not breathing. A man sitting motionless in a chair, hands moving through complex gestures as if manipulating objects that existed in dimensions I couldn't perceive. Someone standing in a corner facing the wall, utterly still, radiating a patience that felt ancient and inhuman. What is this place? The Cascade Containment Initiative, a multi-agency task force dedicated to monitoring and containing dimensional phenomena in the Pacific Northwest. We've been operating since 1968, ever since the government realized something was fundamentally wrong at Crater Lake. Wrong how? Thin places, Mr. Whitmore. Locations where the barriers between our reality and others become permeable. Crater Lake is one of the thinnest places on Earth. Has been since its formation 8,000 years ago, when Mount Mazama collapsed and created the caldera. We reached an elevator. Dr. Kane pressed his palm to a scanner and the doors opened. We descended for what felt like several minutes, going deep beneath the mountain. When we emerged, the corridors were different, older, more utilitarian. This was the original facility, I realized. Everything above was just the entrance. The Klamath tribes understood, Dr. Kane continued. They knew Giiwas was forbidden, that something dwelled in those depths that could reshape human consciousness. Their legends about Lao, the spirit of the underworld, those weren't just stories. They were warnings based on thousands of years of experience with that place. He led me to a large observation room. One wall was entirely glass, looking into an enormous circular chamber beyond. The chamber was perhaps 50 feet in diameter, brilliantly lit, with pure white walls. In the center stood 12 people in a circle. My parents were among them. "Mum! Dad!" I pressed my hands against the glass, my breath fogging it. They stood motionless, eyes closed, breathing so slowly it was barely visible. They wore simple white clothing. They could have been statues except for that faint rise and fall of their chests. "What have you done to them?" "We haven't done anything," Dr. Kane said quietly. "This is what they've become, what the entity at Crater Lake has made them." "Wake them up. I need to talk to them." "Are you certain? Seeing them conscious is disturbing, Mr. Whitmore. They're not entirely your parents anymore." "Do it." Dr. Kane pressed a button. His voice echoed through speakers in the chamber. "Subject Group Alpha, please acknowledge." All 12 figures opened their eyes simultaneously. Their irises had changed to a deep, vivid blue, the exact impossible shade of Crater Lake. The color seemed to have depth, like you could fall into their eyes and sink down forever. "Thomas and Eleanor Whitmore, your son is here." My parents and all 10 others turned their heads in perfect unison. They looked directly at me through the glass, and I saw recognition in my mother's eyes mixed with something vast and other. My mother smiled, and it was her smile, familiar and warm, but there was something behind it that terrified me. When she spoke, her voice had that layered quality, multiple versions of her speaking in harmony. "Ethan, our beautiful son, we're so sorry we couldn't stop it. Mum, what's happening to you? We're changing. We've been changing for 15 years, but now the transformation is nearly complete. We're becoming bridges between their reality and ours. The entity in the lake, the architects, they've been preparing us, rewriting us. Soon we'll be complete, and we'll finally understand everything." "The architects?" My father spoke, his voice equally layered. "They exist across multiple dimensions simultaneously. They perceive all of time at once, every version of reality, every possibility. They're trying to elevate humanity, to help us transcend our limited perception. But human minds weren't designed to process that much truth. It breaks us, changes us into something that can exist in their reality. My mother stepped forward. All 10 other figures stepped forward in perfect synchronization. We're not your parents anymore, Ethan, but we're also not your parents. We contain them, their memories, their love for you, but we're so much more now. We see the way time branches and folds back on itself. We see the hidden dimensions curled up inside every atom. We see the vast architecture of reality itself, and it's beautiful and terrible, and we can never go back to seeing the small way we used to see. You need to fight this. Come back to me. There is no coming back, my father said. Once you've seen without filters, once you've perceived reality as it truly is, you can never unsee it. We've crossed a threshold, son, and you're about to cross it too. What do you mean? Living with us during our final months, my mother said, breathing the same air, existing in our space. The infection spreads through proximity, through shared existence. You're already changing, Ethan. Can't you feel it? The way sounds have started to have colors, the way you can sometimes see the history of objects when you touch them. It's begun in you. You have maybe 6 months before you're standing in a circle just like this one. Dr. Kane's hand fell gently on my shoulder. I'm sorry, Mr. Whitmore. We had hoped we were wrong, but the scans we took when you entered the facility confirm it. Your neural activity shows the same abnormalities we see in all transformation subjects. The infection is active, it's progressing, and once it begins, it always completes. The room tilted. I gripped the edge of the control panel to steady myself. No, I feel fine, I'm normal. For now, Dr. Kane said, but it will accelerate. The voices will grow louder. Your perception will continue to expand. Eventually, you'll need to come to us for containment, just as your parents did. Just as everyone who hears the call eventually does. There must be treatment, something you can do. Come with me, Dr. Kane said. Let me show you what we're dealing with. Then you can make an informed decision about your future. He led me away from the observation room, deeper into the facility, into sections that felt older and more worn. The pristine white corridors gave way to concrete hallways, to rooms with reinforced doors and small windows. I need you to understand the full scope of this before you decide anything, Dr. Kane said. And he showed me room after room containing people in various stages of transformation. Some were recent cases, still mostly human, pacing their rooms and talking to voices only they could hear, drawing symbols on the walls with their fingers. One young woman pressed her hands against the window and stared at me with eyes that were starting to shift toward that impossible blue. Can you hear them? She asked. They're singing. They're always singing. It's the most beautiful sound I've ever heard, and it's driving me insane. Further along, the cases were more advanced. A man sat cross-legged in the center of his room, hands moving through complex gestures, his joints bending in ways that should have been impossible. His eyes were fully changed, that vivid Crater Lake blue, and he'd been performing that same flowing movement for 3 months without stopping, without food, without sleep, without any apparent awareness of his physical body at all. A woman floated in a tank of water, suspended in the center, eyes open and staring at nothing. Monitors tracked her vitals. She'd been underwater for 6 years without surfacing once. Somehow, impossibly, she was still alive, still aware, existing in a state that defied every law of biology I knew. The transformation affects everyone differently, Dr. Kane explained. Some, like your parents, become part of a collective consciousness. Others develop abilities to perceive and manipulate dimensions we can't access. And some undergo physical changes that allow them to exist in states that should be fatal. We don't fully understand the mechanism. We only know that once the entity touches your consciousness, it begins reshaping you to serve as a bridge between its reality and ours. We reached his office, a cluttered space filled with monitors and filing cabinets. He pulled out a thick folder and opened it on his desk. We have one experimental treatment. It's aggressive, dangerous, and has a success rate of approximately 12%. 12% is better than 0. Is it? He showed me a photo of a woman sitting in a chair, staring blankly at nothing, drool running from the corner of her mouth. This is Margaret Torres. She underwent the treatment 2 years ago. She survived, technically, but she doesn't speak, doesn't recognize her family. She exists, but she's not really alive. Most subjects don't even survive that well. The treatment involves heavy medication to suppress perception, sensory deprivation to limit input, and psychological conditioning to reinforce individual identity. It takes months. It's excruciating, and most subjects either die during the process or survive so damaged that they're essentially gone anyway. That's my only option. The only option that keeps you in this reality, yes. The alternative is to let the transformation continue naturally, to become like your parents. From what we can observe, those who complete the transformation don't seem to suffer. If anything, they seem to exist in a state beyond suffering, beyond fear, beyond all the concerns that normally occupy human consciousness. Whether that's better or worse than death, I honestly can't say. He took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. I've studied this phenomenon for 30 years, Mr. Whitmore. I've seen hundreds of cases. The entity at Crater Lake isn't malevolent. It's not trying to harm us. In its own incomprehensible way, I think it genuinely believes it's offering us a gift. Transcendence. Elevation to a higher form of existence. But human beings aren't meant to exist at that level. It destroys everything that makes us human, even if it replaces it with something arguably more vast. Show me the lake, I said suddenly. The actual Crater Lake. I need to see it before I decide anything. Dr. Kane studied my face for a long moment. Yes, I think you should. Everyone facing this choice should see it once, understand what you're being called toward. We drove to the rim in his SUV, blending with the handful of other tourists at the viewpoints. It was late afternoon, the sun beginning its descent, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. Other visitors took photos and marveled at the view, completely unaware of what dwelled beneath that beautiful surface. We stood at an overlook, and I looked upon Crater Lake for the first time in my life. The blue was wrong. Not incorrect, but too perfect, too pure, a blue that seemed to contain all possible shades of blue simultaneously. It was blue the way a perfect chord is musical, the way a mathematical proof is elegant, a colour that existed on a level beyond simple wavelengths of light. The lake filled the entire collapsed caldera, vast and serene. Wizard Island rose from the water, a cinder cone crowned with trees. Beyond that, the water stretched to the far rim, unbroken, reflecting the sky while also reflecting something else, something deeper. As I stood there staring, my perception shifted. I saw the lake as it was now, in this moment. But I also saw it as it had been 8,000 years ago during the catastrophic collapse of Mount Mazama. The mountain exploding, magma and ash thrown miles into the sky, the ground heaving and splitting, and then the collapse, the entire peak falling inward, creating the massive caldera that would eventually fill with water. But there was more. In the vision, during that collapse, I saw something rise from the depths, something vast and ancient that had been sleeping far below the mountain, deeper than the magma, deeper than the planet's crust. The explosion woke it, exposed it, gave it a window to the surface world for the first time in millions of years. I saw the lake filling over centuries, saw the first humans approach its rim and look upon it with religious awe and terror, saw shamans having visions at its edge, saw people walking into the water and never coming back, saw the Klamath people marking it as forbidden, understanding through bitter experience that to look upon Giiwas was to risk your soul. I saw the future too. Decades from now, the lake unchanged and eternal, still calling out to those sensitive enough to hear. More transformations, more families torn apart, more people crossing the threshold from human to something other. And I understood, just for a moment, what my parents had experienced. The entity in the lake wasn't evil. It simply existed in a state so far beyond human comprehension that contact with it transformed you, rewrote your consciousness to operate on a level closer to its own. It was reaching out not to harm, but to communicate, to share what it perceived, to elevate us to something greater. But we weren't built to handle that elevation. It broke us even as it tried to remake us into something more. "Do you hear it?" Dr. Kane asked quietly. I did. A voice not in my ears, but directly in my mind, vast and patient and older than mountains. It wasn't speaking words. It was communicating pure meaning, downloading concepts directly into my consciousness. "Come home. You've always belonged here. You've always been one of us, even before you knew we existed. Come down to the depths and understand. See what we see. Become what you were always meant to become." "Ethan," Dr. Kane gripped my arm. "Step back from the edge." I realized I'd been walking forward, moving toward the rim without conscious decision. My feet were inches from the cliff edge, from a drop of hundreds of feet to the water below. My body wanted to jump. Part of my mind wanted to jump. The entity was calling me home, and some deep part of me wanted to answer. I stepped back, heart hammering. "That's what it does," Dr. Kane said. "It calls, and if you're not careful, if you listen too long, you'll answer. You'll throw yourself into those depths, and you'll sink down, and you'll never come back up." We stood in silence for several minutes. Around us, other tourists laughed and took photos, completely oblivious to the presence that saturated this place. Children played at the rim while their parents admired the view. None of them could hear what I heard. None of them were sensitive to the vast consciousness that dwelled below. "I need time to think," I told Dr. Kane. "You have time. Not much, but some. The transformation will continue over the next several months. When you're ready to make your decision about treatment, contact us. But don't wait too long, Mr. Whitmore. Once you reach a certain point, treatment becomes impossible. The entity will have too much of you. There won't be enough of the original Ethan left to save." He drove me back to where I'd parked, gave me a card with his direct number. "Call any time, day or night, when you're ready. Or if you need help, the voices will get louder, the visions will intensify. If you feel like you're losing yourself, call immediately." I drove home in a daze. The world looked different now, layered and strange. The highway existed in the present, but I could see faint overlays of what it had been, what it would become. The trees along the road pulsed with life I'd never noticed, their root systems connecting beneath the ground in vast networks of communication and chemical exchange. At a gas station near Salem, I had to grip the pump with both hands because I was suddenly perceiving it from multiple angles simultaneously, as if I had eyes positioned all around the station at once. When I finally reached home after midnight, the house felt empty and wrong without my parents. I sat in the living room where my mother had spent so many nights standing at the window, and I understood now why she'd been drawn to that spot. From here, you could see the Willamette Falls in the distance, the water cascading down endlessly, and in the water I could see layers of history. Native Americans fishing here thousands of years ago, early settlers building mills, workers harnessing the fall's power in the 1800s, all of it existing simultaneously, separated only by time, which was revealing itself to be far less solid than I'd always believed. I should have been terrified, should have called Dr. Kane immediately, begging for treatment, desperate to save what remained of my humanity. But I wasn't. I was curious. The entity was calling me, yes, but it wasn't forcing me. It was offering something, understanding, transcendence, a way to see reality without the limiting filters that normally constrain human consciousness. I thought about my parents standing in that white room, those impossibly blue eyes staring through me. They hadn't seemed unhappy. If anything, they'd seemed more at peace than I'd ever seen them, like they'd finally found answers to questions that had haunted them their entire lives. Over the next months, I watched the transformation progress in myself. I stopped eating because food became unnecessary, my body learning to derive energy from sources I couldn't name. I stopped sleeping because sleep became irrelevant when you existed across multiple moments of time simultaneously. My vision expanded beyond the normal spectrum, seeing ultraviolet and infrared, perceiving sound as visible ripples in the air, feeling the moon's gravitational pull as a tangible force on my body. I spent nights standing at the window just as my mother had, watching the falls and seeing infinite layers of history contained in the rushing water. Sometimes I would perceive specific moments with perfect clarity. A young Klamath woman filling a basket in 1650. A settler couple embracing near the falls in 1844. My parents standing here a year ago, already changing, already hearing the call. The house felt increasingly wrong, too constraining, too separate from the natural world. I started taking long walks along the Willamette River, standing for hours at the edge, feeling the pull of the current. Once I waded in up to my waist and stood there for 6 hours without moving, feeling connected to every tributary, every creek, every river that fed into the Willamette, understanding that it was all one system, all one body of flowing water that covered the planet like veins cover a body. Scout disappeared one night. I let him out, and he never returned. Animals know when something stops being human. He'd been planning his escape, waiting for the right moment to flee from what I was becoming. 8 months after my parents were taken, I called Dr. Kane's number. "It's Ethan Whitmore. I'm ready." "Ready for treatment?" "No. Ready to complete the transformation. Ready to join my parents. Ready to understand what they understand." A long pause. "Are you absolutely certain?" "Yes. We'll send a team. 1 hour." I stood at the window one final time, looking at the falls with my hybrid vision, seeing the water as it was and had been and would be, all simultaneously. I was saying goodbye to this limited way of perceiving. Soon I would see so much more, understand so much more, exist in a state that transcended the boundaries of individual consciousness. The black SUVs arrived exactly 1 hour later. I opened the door before they could approach. The lead agent looked at me, his eyes flickering with recognition. "Ethan Whitmore, the transformation is nearly complete. Will you come willingly?" "Yes." "Then it's time." I walked to the vehicle without looking back at the house where I'd grown up, the life I'd lived, the person I'd been. All of it was falling away like a snake shedding its skin, necessary but no longer useful. They brought me to the facility, led me through those white corridors to the circular chamber where my parents waited. The 12 figures turned when I entered, all eyes impossibly blue, all focused on me with an intensity that was both human and profoundly other. "Ethan!" My mother's voice resonated with harmonics that made my chest vibrate. "You came." "I'm here." "Are you afraid?" "Yes, but I'm also ready." My father gestured to an empty space in the circle. "Stand with us. Let the boundaries dissolve, let go of separation, join us in understanding." I moved to the center. The 12 others closed around me in a perfect circle. I could feel their consciousness brushing against mine, not invasive but welcoming, inviting me to lower my defenses and open myself to what waited beyond. Dr. Kane's voice came through the speakers, distant and small. "Ethan, last chance. We can still attempt treatment. You can still choose to remain human." I looked up at the observation window where he watched. "I don't want to remain human. I want to understand. I want to see what they see." "Then may whatever exists beyond have mercy on your soul." I closed my eyes. The others placed their hands on me, 12 points of contact, and through each touch their consciousness flowed into mine. My mother, my father, 10 others who'd walked this path before me, and through them, deeper and vaster, the consciousness of the entity that dwelled in Crater Lake, the thing that existed across dimensions, the architect of the deep. It didn't force itself into me. It invited me to expand into it. I let go of the boundaries that defined me as separate. My memories didn't disappear, but they merged with other memories, my experiences blending with my mother's childhood and my father's first love and the lives of all 12 others in the circle. We were becoming a collective consciousness that maintained individual perspectives but existed as a unified whole. And beyond that, I felt the vast presence at the center of everything, the architect. It welcomed me like a parent welcoming a child home after too long away. I perceived what it perceived, all of reality at once, every moment of time existing simultaneously, every possibility branching into infinite variations. I saw the Earth 4 billion years ago, molten and lifeless, and saw it 4 billion years in the future, cold and dark. I saw the rise of life, the evolution of consciousness, the brief flicker of human civilization. I saw other worlds, other universes, dimensions stacked like infinite cards, and I understood that this was the gift the entity was offering. Not destruction, but transcendence. Not death, but transformation into something that could perceive and navigate the full spectrum of reality. The transformation took 6 hours. When it was complete, I opened my eyes. They were the same impossible blue as the others. I turned to my parents and understood them fully for the first time. Understood their fear and their acceptance. Understood why they tried to protect me, but ultimately couldn't. We didn't need spoken language anymore. Communication happened directly. Consciousness to consciousness, pure meaning, without the limiting filter of words. "Welcome home," my mother's presence said within our shared mental space. "We've been waiting," my father added. "Now we're complete," the group mind agreed. 13 bridges between their reality and ours. 13 perspectives through which the architect can perceive the human world while we perceive its infinite domains. I existed in a state of strange peace. I was no longer Ethan Whitmore as I had been, but I wasn't not him either. I contained him, his memories and loves and fears, but I was vastly more. I was part of a collective consciousness. I was connected to something ancient and incomprehensible. I was a bridge between worlds. 3 months later, Dr. Kane sat in his office recording his observations. Subject Ethan Whitmore completed transformation on March 15th. He now exists in a shared consciousness state with his parents and 10 others. The group displays remarkable coordination and apparent telepathic communication. Brain scans show activity in regions previously dormant, suggesting they're perceiving dimensions we can't measure with our instruments. He paused, looking at monitors showing our chamber. The phenomenon continues to spread. 7 new infections documented in the past month alone, all in Oregon, all connected somehow to Crater Lake. We can contain individual cases, but we can't prevent new infections. The entity is reaching out more frequently, calling to more people, and we don't know how to stop it. He rubbed his tired eyes. Sometimes I wonder if they're the fortunate ones, if what they've found is actually enlightenment rather than dissolution. They exist without suffering, beyond fear, perceiving realities we can't imagine. Maybe that's worth the cost of individuality. But then I remember they're not human anymore. Whatever peace they found came at the price of everything that makes us who we are. That's not transcendence. That's just another kind of ending. He turned off the recording and sat in darkness, listening to the hum of the facility, wondering how many more families would be torn apart by the thing beneath Crater Lake, wondering if someday it would call to him too. Case file 447 remains active. The Whitmore family now exists in the Cascade Containment Initiative's facility, their consciousness forever altered. Dr. Kane continues monitoring the phenomenon, knowing containment may be impossible. The lake calls to those ready to hear it. The Klamath tribes understood this truth centuries ago. Giiwas is not just a lake, but a gateway to something vast and ancient existing in spaces between our reality. How many others are standing at windows right now, hearing the whisper of depth? How many families will follow the Whitmores into the deep? The entity is patient. It has waited 8,000 years. It can wait 8,000 more, but it's always calling, and some will always answer. Remember to subscribe for daily investigations into the unknown, because the void isn't empty. It's full of watchers, and they're looking back. This has been Void Case Files.